The job you fought hardest to get is probably the one with the tightest ceiling on it, and somebody already flagged that in a meeting you were never invited to. That sounds like a conspiracy. It isn't. There's no secret committee plotting your career. What's actually happening is quieter than that, and honestly, more unsettling. Because it doesn't feel like a system working against you, it feels like your own gut telling you something is off. Except your gut isn't guessing. It's picking up on decisions that were made about you on paper months before you noticed anything was wrong. I'm Dre, and I've said in enough calibration sessions and manager debriefs to know that the story people tell about loyalty and dream jobs is not what actually happens behind the door. I'm not here to tell you quitting a great job is brave. I'm here to tell you why, in a lot of cases, it's actually the smart, calculated move, and why the people who quietly walk away from something that looks perfect on paper usually aren't the reckless ones. They're the ones who read the room correctly before anyone said a word out loud. Here's where I want to start, because this is the part nobody explains. The best job you've ever landed, the one that felt like a win, is frequently the one with the slowest path upward. Not because you're not good enough, because everyone else in that seat is also good enough. Top roles attract strong people. Strong people don't leave voluntarily, and when nobody leaves, nothing opens up. Functionally, the prestige of the job and the size of the ceiling above it are working against each other. The better the seat looks from the outside, the more competition is stacked on top of you from the inside. Now here's the thing. This isn't theoretical. In a lot of companies, there's a process, sometimes called calibration, sometimes called a talent review, where managers sit in a room and rank people against each other for a limited number of promotion slots. I'm not saying every company does this exactly the same way, but in systems I've worked with, this is close to universal at any company big enough to have layers. And when you're competing against a full bench of strong performers for one or two open slots, most people don't move. They just wait. And waiting, quietly, is where a lot of this story actually begins. This is where people misunderstand quiet quitting. It gets talked about like it's laziness, like someone just stopped caring for no reason. But functionally, in a lot of cases, quiet quitting is a symptom, not a decision. It shows up before the person has even admitted to themselves that they're checking out. Managers notice it. It gets mentioned in one-on-ones, sometimes logged in engagement conversations, sometimes just talked about informally between a manager and their manager. I'm not saying this happens everywhere the same way. I'm saying I've personally seen versions of this, where the company noticed the disengagement before the employee had consciously decided to leave. And that's the part that should actually make you feel better, not worse. If you've ever quietly checked out of a job that looked amazing from the outside, you weren't being ungrateful. You were reading a ceiling accurately before you had the language to describe it. But this is where it gets more uncomfortable, because the company usually isn't just watching. In a lot of systems, there's something close to informal succession planning. Somebody, somewhere, has already had the conversation about who the backup is for your role in case you leave. I want to be careful here. This isn't a sinister flight risk file with your name circled in red. It's usually a lot more boring than that. It's a manager, in a planning conversation, saying something like, if this person left tomorrow, who covers it? That conversation happens whether or not you're actually planning to leave, which means in a lot of cases, your exit was already modeled before you'd said anything. Not because they wanted you gone, because that's just what planning looks like from their side. And here's where the money part gets interesting, because this is where the design gets a little less accidental. A lot of comp structures, especially in the US, are built around vesting cliffs, deferred bonuses, and payout timing that lines up almost perfectly with the moments people are most likely to consider leaving. I'm not saying every company sits down and designs this specifically to trap you, but functionally, the effect is the same either way. That feeling of, I've invested too much to leave now, is frequently not just your own loyalty talking. It's the intended effect of how the pay was structured in the first place. I'll flag this clearly because vesting and deferred comp norms look different outside the US. So if you're watching this from somewhere else, the exact mechanics may not map onto your situation the same way. But the psychology behind it usually does. Now here's a twist that a lot of people don't expect. Sometimes the person quitting isn't actually the one leaving first. Sometimes management has already quietly started managing someone out long before any formal action happens. Fewer high visibility projects, less air cover in meetings, getting pulled off something you used to own. I've seen versions of this where the employee felt like they were reading tea leaves when really they were reading it correctly. Quitting first in that situation isn't betrayal. It's just getting there before the paperwork does. I want to be careful here too, because this isn't every case. A lot of quitting is just growth seeking, nothing more sinister than that. But when someone tells me they just knew it was time to go, this is often what they were actually sensing. Here's where the conspiracy version falls apart though. And I think this matters because it's the part that actually reduces the fear instead of feeding it. A lot of people assume quitting a dream job burns the relationship permanently. In most cases, it doesn't. Companies generally don't want messy exits. They want clean ones. And boomerang hiring, meaning rehiring someone who left, is common enough that it's not treated as a red flag by default. Functionally, if you leave professionally, most systems file that as pursuing growth, not as a warning. The exception is if there was an actual conduct issue, not just the decision to leave. I know that feels like it should carry more weight than it does, but in the systems I've worked with, a clean exit is usually just filed and forgotten. And this is the part that ties everything together. In the situations I've seen where people looked back with real regret, it almost never tracked with how prestigious the job was. It tracked with why they left. People who left because they clearly identified the ceiling, the comp design, or the quiet reassignment usually didn't look back with regret. People who stayed purely out of fear, ignoring all of that, were the ones more likely to regret the years they gave up. I'll be honest, this isn't a scientific claim. It's a pattern, and there are exceptions, but it's a consistent one. Now, I do want to slow down here, because I don't want you leaving this video assuming every quiet exit means someone was being secretly pushed out. Most of the time, it's simpler than that. Sometimes it really is just burnout. Sometimes it's a real ceiling with no hidden agenda behind it. Sometimes someone genuinely outgrew the role and nothing was going on beneath the surface at all. The pattern I'd actually pay attention to is repetition, not a single rough quarter. One tough stretch means very little. Reduced scope, quiet exclusion from key conversations, and no visible growth path, all showing up together and staying that way, is a very different signal than one bad month. So if you're watching this trying to figure out where you actually stand, here's what to look for. And I want to be careful with this part too, because none of it proves anything on its own. It may be a signal if your promotion timeline has gone quiet for longer than feels normal for your level. It may be a signal if you've been slowly moved off the visible work without really being told why. It may be a signal if your one-on-ones have started feeling like status updates instead of actual conversations about your growth. None of these things confirm anything by themselves, but a repeated pattern is a lot more telling than any single moment. The good news is, most of this is preventable, or at least navigable, once you actually understand the mechanism instead of just feeling the anxiety. You may not be able to change what's already been decided about a role internally. That part's out of your hands. But you can stop tying your sense of career progress purely to how impressive the job title sounds. Pay attention to actual promotion velocity around you, not just prestige. Separate the real financial upside of staying from the sunk cost pool of a vesting schedule doing exactly what it was built to do. And if you do decide to leave, leave clean. Give real notice. Don't burn the relationship over frustration, because a professional exit protects the boomerang path even if you never plan on using it. So back to the title, because I think it deserves a straight answer now instead of just a hook. Smart people who quietly quit their dream job usually aren't quitting because the job was bad. They're quitting because they read the ceiling, the comp design, or the quiet reassignment correctly, faster than the company was willing to say any of it out loud. It's not a cartoon. Nobody's plotting against you in a smoke-filled room. It's calmer than that, more procedural than that, and that's exactly what makes it easy to miss while you're inside it. Be the person who reads the signals early instead of the one who only makes sense of them 2 years later. Watch the ceiling, not just the title. Know what the pay structure is actually designed to do to your decision-making. And when it's time to go, go clean. Because how you leave becomes part of the story the company keeps, whether they ever say so or not.